Hi, my name's Andy Day. I'm the founder and CEO of Capital A, and welcome to M&A Q&A. Today we have Felix Velarde, author, investor, startup and agency expert, business mentor, chairman, the list goes on. Felix is also CEO of 2Y3X, a consultancy program for agency owners to help them accelerate their growth and their valuation prior to exiting. Felix is also a non-exec and a board advisor to several agencies and startups, as well as a Burning Man regular. He sold his first agency in the 90s, which is quite a while ago now, and closed another spectacular deal where he rolled up 12 agencies from a choice of 100, I believe. We'll talk about that in more detail later. He's helped other agencies get 8 times and 12 times EBITDA for their exits, so very useful person to know. And I wanted to bring Felix in today as he can help us understand a little bit more about what it takes to find an agency that's a good fit when we're looking for acquisitions, and also what you need to do to build up value, get yourself to the point that you can step away and exit the business that you're thinking of acquiring today. So Felix, how are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you, Andy. It's a pleasure to be here and nice to meet you all.
So we're going to kick off with a quick background check, as we always do, Felix. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you got into this whole marketing and tech world? And also maybe a little bit about that first agency deal all the way back in the 90s.
So I never really had a job that I wasn't fired from, actually. That's the truth of it. Because I had blue hair and I was sparky, let's say. And then I fell in love with the internet, and in the very late 80s got involved selling advertising space on something called Prestel, which was a kind of walled garden version of the World Wide Web, way before the World Wide Web. World Wide Web got switched on in 1993, by which point I was sort of casting around for something new to do. And I decided to start a multimedia agency, which very quickly became a web design company, and one of the first web design companies in the world, Hyper Interactive. I sold that to my business partner because he and I had finished our journey together, I think is a polite euphemism. And I opened a new agency called Head New Media, which very quickly became the world's most awarded digital agency. And we got pursued by all of the big networks. And because we were highly creative, we decided to sell to Lowe, which at the time was the world's 4th largest network and the world's most awarded advertising group. So it seemed like a perfect match. And then we did the deal. We sold on a multiple of 12, which was fantastic. And then culture clash and horribleness, and then eventually .com. Bust, which knocked everybody flat, including us. So I went bust. In the meantime, I'd started the world's first SEO agency and one of the first couple of interactive TV agencies. And I was always slightly ahead of the curve and watched as other people made more money than I did by spending more money and coming in later. And then in 2001, I started the world's first ECRM agency, stole all of Mailing Fung's ideas from CRM principles and her work at Oracle. Thankfully, she and I are now really, really good friends, and we've been working together for the last 5 years, but I did nick all of her best ideas. And then, yeah, I mean, ended up running a group and giving it all up in end of 2014. I decided I'd had enough. Sold everything, got rid of everything, took a year off, and then spent a year going to festivals, which was fabulous.
Which includes Burning Man, I guess. So.
Yeah, it did. So I'm now one of the crew for Sharky's Bar and Lounge on the Playa, which is Burning Man, big free cocktail bar. Operates 7 days of the festival, just giving away cocktails, which is fun. Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, that's the nature of Burning Man's giving everything away, isn't it? Pretty much.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to that deal that you kind of skipped through there very quickly. Where obviously that first sale that you made gave you a bit of a taste for something bigger.
Oh yeah.
And when we were doing the research for this, you told me about these 12 agencies that you rolled up. And you mentioned that there was a choice of 100. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that
Yeah. So
started.
I was approached by and this is so we're talking about 2011-ish, I think, 2010 or 11. And I'd already had a long career, so 17 years of founding, running agencies, and either selling them for a lot of money or selling them to get them out of trouble. And so I've done, I've made every mistake that you can possibly make running an agency. I have cocked up more companies than any of you are going to do, I hope. But I've also had one or two really good successes. And along the way, I got approached by Mark Adams, who was the original founder of Next 15. And at the time, the original, when he founded it, it was called Text 100, became the Next 15 group. Which is now one of my clients at Adams. He came to me and said, listen, we need a new CEO, our outgoing CEO, who's amazing, also another co-founder of Text 100. And so I was kind of flattered. And so I joined as CEO of the conversation group, and we decided to put together some agencies and see what happened. And at the time, my expertise was CRM strategy and digital strategy at a very, very high level. I'd worked for most of the world's top brands and had a fine old time of it. And I decided that what we wanted to do was a sort of multi-channel CRM type offering. And I'd been involved in a book on multi-channel ecosystems. And so I went out looking for agencies for us to acquire. And I actually met 100 different agencies, some of them even twice. Over the course of about 6 months, I went and met at least one, mostly two agency owners a day across the course of 6 months. And it was fascinating. My God, it was fascinating. And most of them were kind of like me. They started an agency because they'd had an opportunity to do so, and had built it through chutzpah and hard work and brain power and a little bit of charisma and all of that kind of stuff and some luck, but didn't really know how to run businesses. And by this stage, I'd made so many mistakes that I was starting to really understand that running a business is very different to the business of an agency, which usually is either to do the best creative work that you can, or to revolutionize marketing, or to take these on a step, or to change the world, all of which is very different to running a business. And changing the world, doing what you do now, whatever it is, whether it's social media or TikTok or whatever, is very different to the business of running a business has been around and stable now for about 180 or 190 years. The agencies have been around for about 180 years, and nothing's really changed. We still have the same old debates about in-house or external and all that kind of stuff. But reality is business is business is business. You make 20% profit, you make 55% staff cost to gross profit ratio, and your business is good. And that sticks 3 months money in the bank, and so you can grow and all of that kind of stuff. Managing people hasn't really changed. It's progressed and become more the sort of doing it nicely has become more universal. But that's very different to, I want to change the world and make TikTok a better place, whatever it is. So I went and met all of these amazing people in a variety of different disciplines. We decided that we'd pick one from each discipline. So we had a research company, a PR agency, and a CRM agency, which I happen to own, as a creative agency, and all sorts, and dev companies, back end production, and it was brilliant advertising, and going out and meeting all of these people gave me this amazing perspective of different kinds of owner who are frankly all pretty much in the same boat of learning as they went along.
And you had to meet those all in person.
Yeah, well, it was great. It gave me an excuse to get memberships to the Groucho Club and places like that. So
yeah, of course, I thought I'd seen you somewhere before. Okay, so you met those, and then you rolled those 12 up. What was the nature of the deals that you did with those guys? Were you making like 100% acquisitions, or was there some kind of other?
We did a ratcheted share swap on the basis. So I'm very progressive. I always have been. When I say progressive, it's very easy to do the sort of acquisitions by saying, okay, we'll pay you 3 times your average net profit over the next 3 years, and therefore it won't cost us anything apart from legal fees, which is a great way of doing it, by the way. But I quite like things where people feel like they've got a stake, and I'm not really interested in one of the big problems with doing those 3 times net profit over average net profit over three years deals is that everybody's focused on their own P&L, and so you don't get any collaboration whatsoever. In fact, you get warfare. And that's fine if you're a big group like WPP, where you can ride it out and you just wait to see who survives, because you know that 1 in N is going to survive and thrive. But when you're a small group, you can't afford to do that. And for me, I like doing deals which are win-win deals. So we basically said to the companies that we folded in that we would, if we bought them at a multiple of 3 or 4 or whatever the multiple was based on their size, we would be able to aggregate all of them, and we'd be able to sell ourselves at a multiple of 12 or 15, or, you know, if one day by some miracle we went to the market, you'd be talking about a 30 multiple. And so we said we'd split the difference. So we did share swap deal where the contractual split the difference thing, so that everybody wins out of them collaborating rather than them focusing on their own P&Ls.
So what was the draw for them, Felix? What was the draw for them coming in? Obviously, there was an end goal to that, because everybody would get out a better multiple than they could get on their own. But what was the carrot to get them into the group? What were you
really, it was. I don't know what stage you guys are all at, but agencies grow in sort of spurts. They go up from plateau to plateau, and you at each plateau, basically what happens is you grow through, you know, sort of the first plateau is £1 million, right? You grow to 1 million, and you do that on force of personality and salespersonship, right? You get to 2 million because you've now assembled a good team around you. You get to 3.5 million because you're starting to learn how to run a business. And then suddenly you realize that you've got to reformat your business in order to put in management structures and timesheets and shit like that, in order to get to your 5, 6, 7 million, right? And then you've got another change that happens at 6 million, another one at 10, another 15. And so I'd realized that I'd spotted that this was a factor. And so all of the companies that I spoke to, I was trying to identify which ones had hit a ceiling and couldn't get past that ceiling, because I knew I could get them past that ceiling. And so the convincer really was, join the group. I will put in place the program that will give you a framework, will bring your team in, you will engage your superstars, we'll push you through this program over the course of 2 years. In that time, you're likely to double your revenue. And by the end of that, you'll have the choice as the owner to either leave or stick with the deal. But in the meantime, we'll have taken you past that growth barrier, and working will be fun again. And a lot of that, it was about the choice of the people that we got. So fundamental to all of this was us knowing what our core values was, a personal values. I don't mean the shit you see on people's websites. I mean personal values. And they're very specific, okay? And they're usually the sort of things that got embedded when you were 7 or 11, and they're never going to change. So we wanted to identify that first, and then the people that we picked to try and persuade to come into the group and join this scheme were people who shared those personal core values. So we did a lot of work on who the people were as people, because we knew that it was going to be bloody hard work. You know, by this stage, I'd already done several deals. I'd done a couple of big earnouts, and I knew how horrible they are. I mean, they are genuinely, if you're an entrepreneur, you sell to somebody else, suddenly you've got a boss in my case, for the very first time. And it's hell, because you're not used to it. Yeah. Somebody's sitting there saying to you, can you justify why you spent, you know, $3,000 nipping off to Cannes? It's like, because it's my company and I can see the value in it. Yeah, no, justify it to me on this spreadsheet. That is galling, I have to say, and causes instant anger. And so when you're acquiring companies, that's a big factor. And so a lot of the argument for doing it this way was about find people who share your values, because then you can all get through the tough times because you all relate to each other. When I say share values, I don't mean educational values or background or cultural values. I mean things like, my values are honor and empathy. Okay, those are the two things that I strive to adhere to. Everybody in my organization in 2Y3X shares those values. And we've got some subsidiary values as well, like trustworthiness and so on, and respect for people. But that's led for me to an incredibly diverse crew of people. Every color, every gender, every orientation, every religion, every location, actually, starting to be anyway. I hope that we get more. But the core values are something that's deeply shared. So then I learned that when I was doing this roll-up with the conversation group.
Okay, so something I get from that, and it's something we talk about a lot as well, is really, it's about starting with a big enough pool for you to have drilled down to get those final 12, and all of that legwork you did really paid off. And it sounds like you probably ended up being a great psychologist at the end of that as well, I should imagine.
I wouldn't say that, but you do spot patterns.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the interesting things is you're largely dealing with very smart people. And most people who start companies and are successful at them are very smart. It doesn't matter whether you're IQ smart or EQ smart or street smart, but somewhere in there, there's a spark of tenacity and resilience and imagination and creativity and the ability to corral people around you, right? And so that makes it a joy to deal with. Now, I have to say that by this point in my agency career, because I still had Underwired, and Underwired at the time was the leading CRM strategy company. And so I was, at the same time I was CEO of the conversation group, I also still owned Underwired. And so I brought in a managing director and a new head of client services to come in and run the company for me. And I spent a hell of a lot of time working with an amazing woman called Julia Parry at UI Impact, who's a psychometric, I don't know what the word is, psychometricist. But she's brilliant. So she and I worked closely together when we were finding the MD for Underwired, and he was the ex-managing director from agency.com, a guy called John Thew. Really, really lovely, thoroughly decent man. And he came in and ran the agency so that I could spend all of my time doing the M&A thing. And one of the things that I'd caution to any of you that are thinking about going out and buying companies is that you're meeting new intelligent people who are one step behind where you were. And so it's great fun, and it's really, really seductive, and it will pull you in, and the company that you're supposed to be running will suddenly have a vacuum. And I've seen it happen time and time again, is you get swept up in this M&A thing because deal making is awesome, meeting new people is awesome, learning is awesome, that your company then takes a hit behind you. So I think that the good thing that I did at that point, I mean, having had such a mixed bag up until that point of successes and monumental failures, you know, I really did cut things up. The learning from that was find a brilliant management team, figure out the frameworks that they're going to use to run the business in the way that you want it to be run, figure out how you're going to carry on holding their feet to the flames, so that you can then go off on holiday for 6 months, meeting prospective business partners, because they are business partners. And these are your group's future, right? You are going to be handing over to them at some point, whether it's in 5 or 10 years time, or, you know, as quick as you can. You're going to be handing over to the people you recruit now. And like anything else, you must only do deals with superstars. Yeah, it's like employees. You don't want to employ B players just because it makes you feel great, to be cleverer than them. You need to hire people who are much better at it than you are, so that you can be liberated, so that you can do the stuff that you really want to do. So, yeah.
So I was going to ask you about the integration of those businesses. That it must have been, or it would have been, quite difficult. But it sounds like you dealt with that before it even happened, because of the values.
I laid the groundwork for it, certainly. I mean, I'd had an experience. I'd sold Underwired to a listed roll-up, and I'd had a really, really great CEO called Rod Hyde of that group, and he was the first time I'd ever had a boss that I actually respected, and he was brilliant. And he showed me the power of getting everybody involved, all of the different holding, so managed by the holding company, but all of the different component companies. He'd got them involved in building the strategy for the whole group. And so I built on that learning and started using the strategy map, which is now the foundation of 2Y3X, is using things like Kaplan and Norton's balanced scorecard and Capgemini's transformation map, and the tools that Vern Harnish talks about in Scaling Up, and a few other things. But that was the conversation group was the first time that I really deployed that with leaders, where I got them to describe the 3-year strategy for the group, even though I already knew what it was. But I got them to reinvent it, and I coached them into reinventing it the way that I wanted it to be reinvented, so that they felt as though they had actually created the plan of action. And then that co-creation meant that we were all in it together. And what happened was, you get each of the people, each of the stakeholders then holding each other to account to deliver what they promise they're going to deliver. And it's still the way that we run the growth acceleration program. Is we build the superstar team at the top of or in the company that's on the program. We co-invent the 3-year strategy with them, co-design the 1-year plan, get them to volunteer to take on a bunch of quarterly tasks each, and then do complex team coaching, essentially, to get them to hold each other to account, so that by the end of the first year of the 2-year program, they're running the business and the CEO doesn't have to. And then by the second year of the program, the business is accelerating and the CEO can go off and do whatever they want. And usually that's exit, or go and start doing what you're doing, which is M&A. So we use the same principles now in the growth accelerator and the programs that we have, as we did when I was learning through trial and error by putting together the group.
Okay, cool. Actually, some of those things that you listed out there might be handy if we get those, that I can put somewhere, that you mentioned a few different sources of scorecards and stuff that you're using. Okay, so there's just a little bit of history, just for the sake of getting the historic record right. So there was a few other agencies that you were involved with at board level. Have we missed any of those out?
I don't know. So I sold to Hasgrove. I bought that agency back, and I bought that. I mean, interestingly, I bought Underwired back from Hasgrove after Rod Hyde left, and his successor in the group was somebody that I really didn't get on with, and it was a perfect example of, it really is about the people, and they essentially started running Underwired into the ground. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to buy that back, because.
Is there anything you can tell us about that deal, Felix? How did you buy it back? I mean, did you have a backer and an investor that came in with you, or?
No, not at all. I spent 7 months getting them to sell it to me for £1.
Oh, nice one. Well, we all read about those types of deals. And how did you manage to swing that? So they gave you it back for free?
Well, it was cost me 50 grand in legal fees. So at the time it was doing about, I don't know, 1.7 million or something in revenue. So they bought it. We'd added something like 4 million quid of revenue, and then there was a change in CEO-ship in the group, and then they lost 3 million quid of revenue, and so we were down to 1.7. I just thought, this is horrible, and we had been the most profitable agency in the group, and we were just fighting. It was constant fighting and battle. So if you haven't got the right personalities in the room, it is going to be a battle, because entrepreneurs are egomaniacs, right? And not obviously none of you, but mostly, because we all think that we can do it better. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing it.
There's a few smiles there. I think everybody.
Yeah, no, Will's sitting there saying, no, not me. So you can get into, if it's the wrong values, you can get into a battle of egos and wills. And you're talking about very strong-willed people. In this case, it was a very, very strong-willed CEO and a very strong-willed Felix. And so I decided that I would, because I didn't really have any options, so I started a negotiation. And so then, what would it take for me to buy back the name and the brand and the people? And as I say, it took 7 months of wrangling and some pretty dirty tactics on their part, and I can say that because it doesn't exist anymore. But yeah, some of the people involved really weren't very nice. So it was a traumatic experience. In retrospect, it was a dumb thing to have done. I should have just walked away and started something else. But I did it anyway. But it was excruciatingly stressful 7 months, because I wasn't in control, because it was a wrangle. It was like just judo wrestling. It was awful. And yeah, so did the deal, left, doubled the revenue in 11 months, doubled the profit in 12 months, and then at the same time was embarking on the group thing, and then found John to run the agency with my long-time business partner, creative director Jason Holland, and then they ran it as I ran the conversation group until I decided to stop everything in 2014.
Right. So that pretty much brings you up to 2Y3X.
Yeah, so I did the portfolio thing. I decided, I went to every festival you could possibly go to, drank all the Kool-Aid that you could possibly drink, which probably 2 of you are old enough to know what I'm actually talking about, and then came back and thought, okay, what do I do now? And then I really looked around and thought, you know what, there are a million non-execs. I may be, the second oldest person in digital, but the reality is, every time I go for a non-exec job, I've got 100 competitors. And I went to see my M&A lawyer, Jo Evans. She's been my M&A lawyer for 20 years, and she's amazing at Lewis Silkin, thoroughly recommended. And she said, well, if you want to if you want to not have any competitors, increase your prices until nobody's competing with you. And what I discovered was, the more I increased my prices, the more people listened to what I say. And the more they listened, the more successful they were, because any plan is better than no plan, but any plan that you actually stick to is infinitely better than the world's best plan that you kind of don't pay much attention to. And so the 2Y3X program was born, and it's as I say, it's a 2-year program. Every single company that's completed it has doubled its revenue. At least some have tripled. I sell 2 or 3 of the companies, or help 2 or 3 of the companies sell every year. We've just done a deal to sell one of the program companies for a multiple of 8 on a 600 EBIT, which is very strong indeed. I love the selling process. I love M&A. It's great, but it's not my specialism. My specialism is taking people who've hit that whichever ceiling it is, whichever that, and keep bouncing against that ceiling, and taking them to the next one or the one beyond that. And that's the fun for me. And we now have, as a result of COVID, because we went pro bono completely all last year, largely because we didn't have a choice. I mean, who's going to buy spend 100 grand on or 50 grand on a program if, times like last year. So we went pro bono, but then that allowed us to recruit a whole heap of amazing consultants who've all run their own businesses, have all sold their own businesses, have all been CEOs. And so we now have an office in the Middle East, in Saudi and Dubai and Lebanon. We've got an office in Santa Barbara in California. We've got an office in Tulum servicing New York, because she really has sorted out her life. We've got an office in Zambia, where we're working for fintech companies. Yeah, I mean, so I'm having a ball.
So, and your would you call it a course, a program? It becomes very, very highly regarded. Some very senior people that I know in agency world recommend it. So, what are some of the things that you're teaching your clients that are on that program? I mean, it almost sounds like you're able to go in to the matrix, the agency matrix, and change things up and get these results for the agencies that you work for, but also you're doing that for your clients as well. And like you say, that you're helping them exit as well for silly multiples, really.
Yeah.
So I mean, what's the sort of thesis behind the 2Y3X? Well, can you explain the name first?
2Y3X came from it's 2 years, 3 times revenue. Right. Because I kept getting it. I kept hitting those numbers, and I spent my entire agency career trying to find a way of creating a boxed product. Yeah, the people would go, oh, I want one of those, and be able to pick it off the shelf. And finally, 2Y3X became that boxed product after I'd quit my agency career. But it's a framework. So we go in, we do 1 day a month with our clients for the whole of the 2 years. And it's really, really simple. We start with creating the long-term strategy, a 3-year strategy. So we start at the end and we say, okay, applying Edwin Locke's goal setting theory, you think that your goal is 10 million revenue and therefore 2 million EBIT. We're going to say stuff that, well, let's make it 15. Let's make it interesting. Goal setting theory basically says the higher and harder the goal, the more likely you are to put together a plan to get to it. And if you include your superstars, then they'll figure it out too, and then you'll get there. And one of the reasons that agencies sort of porpoise or feast and famine is because they have a 10 or 20% annual growth thing. If you make that 70%, then you're really going to have to think about it. And so that we use that as the basis of how we hit our outrageous growth goals. So we start with that 3 years. We work out what's going on in year 3 in order to be able to attain those goals. If you want to leave by the end of the 3rd year, well, guess what? You're going to need a senior management team running the business for you so that you can leave, right? And they need to have been doing that for at least a year, probably 2 years, because you'll spend the last year doing M&A, and you can only do that if somebody else is running the business. Oh, look, so you're starting to say, given my end goal, I'm now having to start to plan ahead to get there. So you start at the end, you work your way backwards. There's a video of me explaining this on our website at 2y3x.com. By the way, it's a 15-minute video. And you break that down into 5 different sort of subject areas: people, clients, sales and marketing, business processes, and corporate and financial. And you work your way backwards until you come to this year. And usually, in order to get to year 3, this year requires about 20 different tasks to be done, systemic changes to be done. One of those is going to be fire all of your C players. One of them is going to be put in place who the A method of hiring in order to hire just A players from here on in. Another one's going to be how to do, job scorecards. Another one's going to be sort out your proposition. One's going to be sort out your workflow, timesheets, utilization recovery, all of the stuff that you ought to do, but nobody ever gets around to. And then we put that in the right order using this team, by which point the team really understands why they're doing it and why they're doing it in that order. And then and if we've got a team of 5 people and we've got 20 tasks, that's 1 task per person per quarter. Great. And so our job as facilitators is to coach the team through each of these quarters. We break the quarters down into research, prototype, and implement. And our job is to hold their feet to the flames, and also to hold the highest possible standard, and to give people the right reading materials and research materials so that they can come up with the answer themselves that is the correct answer. And the only reason we know what the correct answer is because, in truth, it's because I've screwed up so many times, and all my colleagues have screwed up so many times, that we know what not to do, and anything left is the right answer. And then we've all applied it and been right a few times. So it works. But yeah, I mean, that's the methodology. The secret sauce is how you put the team together and how you motivate that team.
Right. So, I mean, it sounds really, really good. Is there anything besides that one video on your website? Maybe we should all be watching anything that you've got on that.
I mean, if you do go to the website, there's a load of things, there's podcasts and videos, recorded events where we talk about. I'm really completely happy to give all of this stuff away because I know that most people can't do it themselves. So, it does require external facilitation. So there's a lot of material on the website that talks about different aspects of this, and shows you the frameworks and so on.
You're bringing the accountability as well. And what can you tell us about maximizing exit value? Because I know that's a big part of what you do.
Yes.
Any agency CEOs, especially these guys here, looking to make several acquisitions.
Yeah.
At the end of that, everybody's goal pretty much is looking to exit to a bigger agency.
Yeah.
So how do you do that once you've made the integration? What's the key sort of part to maximizing?
So there are 2 parts of it. One is so I've done a lot of due diligence, both for myself, but also I did the due diligence on B. Heard's acquisitions, as an example, and essentially you're scoring companies. You start off with the maximum possible multiple for that size of agency or of acquisition based on its EBIT. And then you discount the maximum possible multiple based on whether or not it's well managed, whether or not it's got retained clients and predictable income, whether its processes are sorted, whether its risks are sorted. There's a whole bunch, there's a scorecard, right? And so in order to maximize your revenue, your exit multiple, you need to nail every single discount factor. Okay, you need to have dealt with it and oversupplied it or overserviced it in a positive way. And I mean, that's what what 2x3x does. Is one of the generators of it originally was prepping people for sale, and knowing what people look for in acquisitions, to say, do you know what, I'll discount on that because there's nothing they can do about arguing against it, because it introduces risk. If you haven't, for example, if you haven't got a risk register, then there are going to be risks in your business that I can stick in the warranties and stuff, but actually there's still risks, and I don't like risks as an acquirer. So all that kind of stuff. So is nail all of your discount factors by going through a due diligence process on you, or a program like 2x3x, or Andy and people like Andy do consulting on sort of tactical stuff that buyers will look for as discounts, and fix all that. Okay. Second thing is get your succession team absolutely right. Yeah, you are going to leave. the buyer knows that there is a 70% chance that you won't like being managed by somebody for the first time in 25 years, and you will leave in 3 months' time. The last deal that I did when I sold Underwired, I was out 7 weeks later. I did the deal very deliberately on the basis I wanted to get out. But we engineered it, and the buyer knew and was pleased to get rid of me because I engineered it in that way. So that's a big consideration. Yeah, get your succession sorted out, because I want to buy something that I know is going to run when you've run away. And then third, and the most important bit, is strategic fit. Make yourself famous for one single thing that fits into a few buyers' requirements list. So when I sold Underwired, we were the best CRM strategy company, and we didn't do much execution. There were big companies that you can go to, email marketing companies and all that kind of stuff, but we were the best at strategy. And at the time, most of the groups were desperate for CRM strategy. So we made ourselves famous for that. Even though in our last year, we built £1 million worth of websites for British Land, we just never told anybody about it. Be laser focused about your proposition.
So, I mean, how does that apply to an agency that's made several acquisitions? So if you're making yourself famous for one thing, would that be a vertical, or would it, talk to somebody that made...
The conversation group was, its specific niche was, we were the only multi-channel CRM group. And we were able to do CRM in every single channel using every single means at our disposal, from advertising to, so it was all locked together. So you could do straightforward customer journey based linear CRM, but you could do that across every single channel in an integrated way, because we had every agency and every specialism believing the same thing.
Right.
So, you can't just doing a generalist roll up makes you a small generalist, and the only reason somebody will then buy you is if they're not in this country and they don't have a small generalist in this country, right? Now that's fine if your target audience, and you need to understand who is going to buy you and who you want to buy you. Yeah, when you're starting out, you need to figure out who is going to buy you and what is going to be in their heads when it comes to buying you, and why you're the perfect fit. And sometimes that requires a bit of re-engineering at the last minute, but usually you can set it up. If you've got some kind of prescience and you know what's coming up and what's going to be sexy in 4 or 5 years' time, then that's what you need to aim to do. And if you're going to build a small group, build around whatever you think that future looks like. Proposition is the one thing I still do myself, right? I love doing agency propositions. So I've got to think about it. And if you go to the website, you'll see loads of agency propositions that you probably heard of before if you're in agency land. But it is about being single-minded. Yeah, you can't just be a generalist in the hope that Coke is going to phone you up. Coke's not going to phone you up. Sorry. Yeah, Coke's going to phone the chairman of Ogilvy and say, by the way, can you do a 50 million quid campaign for me? Yeah, so you might as well be a specialist. Right? And when you're doing acquisitions, do acquisitions that are nearest neighbor or rounding out this new service. I was already doing CRM. I wanted to do multi-channel CRM because nobody else was doing it. I did the roll up. We went out when the first two clients that we won were Bauer Media for their multi-channel CRM program across everything, all of their radio stations and magazines and so on. The second one that we won was Tesco. Yeah. The board of Tesco, the world's greatest CRM company, hired the conversation group to redesign its multi-channel CRM strategy. And that was only because we built the thing so that we could go to people like Tesco and say, do you know what? We know what's next. So when you're planning your acquisitions, firstly, people, get the person right that you're buying, and the people that's their team, get that right, because you can't afford to get that wrong. But also it's got to fit with your vision of what the purpose of your group is. And if the only purpose of your group is to give yourselves a bigger exit, great, but put yourself in the mind of the buyer and figure out what they might be looking for. When I sold Underwired, we had 16 suitors, 9 offers, and 3 went down to the wire. And I did that deal 7 weeks start to finish, and then 7 weeks later I was out the front door.
Wow, that's the dream. We're just coming up on the hour, so I just got a couple more things, and then we'll open the floor for some more questions from the guys here. You also talk about board strategy, roadmaps. I'm guessing some of this is going to be in the book that's coming out, which we'll talk about in a second as well. But just generally, what do you think about boards and building a board in general? Any advice around that?
Right, so I chair agencies. My side gig, if you like, my side. I've got 4 side gigs.
One of your side
one of my many side gigs. So I'm CEO of the 2Y3X program. I do proposition development. I'm chairman of a bunch of agencies, and I work for People Centered Internet, which is Vint Cerf's organization for rolling out the internet in a sort of a people-oriented way. Being a chairman is really interesting because what you see is all the things that have gone before you. And so, there are lots of companies, there are people like Cactus and Guider and all of that kind of stuff, and, Polymensa and what have you. And they're really interesting. Some of them are community oriented. Some of them are sort of mastermind type group oriented and peer support. And if you're sub £1 million, then you'd go to Cactus, for example. And if you're sub 1.5 million, you go to Robert Craven at Guider and what have you. I think that when you're putting together, right, board is very, very different to management team, and that is very, very different to strategic change team. And I think a chair is incredibly useful for holding you to account. Yeah, because we all need to be held to account, right? I consider myself to be extremely experienced as a chair, and I'm really good at holding other people to account. And yet I have a personal trainer, right, who every Monday morning on Zoom shouts at me for not having done as much exercise as I was supposed to, right? And we all need somebody to hold us to account and to make sure that we think things through properly and so on. So having a chair or a non-exec like that is really good. Non-execs come in several different flavors, but most of them are passive advice on tap. And passive advice on tap is really nice. Somebody to bounce ideas off, somebody to phone at 10 o'clock in the evening when your planning director's quit, somebody to nurse you through M&A maybe, and make some introductions. That's nice, it's passive, it's cheap. A really good chairperson is going to really represent you in the market and make waves. And if you're properly doing a group and you're thinking about sort of AIM listing or something like that, a chair is invaluable because they'll bring real buckets of proper experience if you hire the right one. And then there are programs like mine which are, they're not about the senior team or the board, they're just about the superstars in the business and how you grow the business. I'm in terms of boards, and I've never really been fixated on them. It's the owners and a finance person reporting into it, and maybe a non-exec making sure everybody's being honest. But I don't think that they have much value particularly. Senior management teams likewise tend to be there either through Peter Principle, as in they've been promoted to the level of their own incompetence, or they're custodians because they're really good managers. And senior management team usually are conservative and change resistant. And if you genuinely want to grow fast and hard, you need people who are open to change and innovation and breaking things. So usually that comes from the superstars in the business, not from the senior team. So I prefer working with the way that our program works is we find the future in the agency You know, there's usually a 22-year-old who you know is just going to run their own thing at some point, and you know, and so just representatives from across the business, because that way you get innovation and real change, and you get the whole of the business buying into the process. So that's quite important. Sure, I'm not sure if that answered your question. It was long-winded.
Yeah, I think it does. So I think what I get from that is that the boards are not as massively important as people think. As long as you've got the shareholders and the sort of founders in the business, and maybe somebody extra who can add advice in and help out, you know, when you need a bit of experience or somebody to cry on.
Totally.
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, so can you just tell us what you're working on at the moment, Felix? I know you've got a book coming out in summer.
I am. I've just posted in the group chat, by the way, Balanced Scorecard by Kaplan and Norton. Interesting book. My LinkedIn, so you can connect if you want to. 2Y3X, so you can go and look at videos and listen to recordings and so on, and find out what we do, obviously. Yeah, and for me, next is this.
Here we go.
Yeah, isn't that cool? They said so. It's being published by Hachette everywhere in the English-speaking world on June the 10th. It's called Scale at Speed, and it's a proper manual. It is the manual for 2Y3X. Every single bit about how you run a company and how you build how do you build scale.
When's that out? End of June, did you say?
June 10th.
June the 10th.
June the 10th.
Well, brilliant. That's going to cost you a lot of money if you can get the book instead of doing the course.
Yes, although the thing I've just posted a link to, so you can pre-order the book. Pre-order the book.
Pre-ordered. I will definitely be getting a copy of that. I'm sure everybody here is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting for me is I've got the knowledge, I've got the experience, I've made some money, and my biggest frustration for the first 10 or 15 years of running agencies was nobody told me that there was a formula for doing business, for running a business. And as I said right at the beginning, business has been around in this format for 180 or 190 years. So why am I having to learn it through trial and error? That just is absurd. So 2Y3X is there to take all of that crap away. And this book takes all of that crap away. It tells you how to do it. The truth is, if you want to follow every step in the book, you're going to need somebody to help you do it. And with any luck, you'll come to us and say, help us do it. But, you know.
And it's not just agencies, is it? Just
social impact companies, tech companies, travel, hospitality, destinations, data of all kinds, machine learning, VR and AR, engineering even. So we've got consultants in all sorts of things. We've just fintech company, Africa, yeah.
So thank you so much for that, Felix. I'm sure everybody's got a load of questions now. I know one person who's going to ask a question. So thank you very much, and thank you for putting up the details. I'll make sure that we share them later, and for anybody else that's watching this another time, those will be available with the video as well. So open the floor. Do we have any questions from the room?
Yeah, hi there, Felix. Thanks very much. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
You mentioned mitigating discount factors. You said, yes, clear the discount factors and people can't knock you down on the price. Obviously, there's going to be multiple, but what would you say are the sort of the 2 or 3 biggest sort of the highest impact discount factors?
Just to qualify my answer slightly, this isn't really just about them being able to knock you down on price. It's also about you being a company that is fit and singing and fantastically well run. So if you get yourself into that position, you become so sexy to buyers, right? So it's got lots of different ramifications here. Biggest ones are succession team, repeatable or predictable income, or at least the ability to accurately predict what is going to happen. Yeah, so a consistency in your ability to forecast what's going to happen with your business, even if you don't have retained income. Yeah, because that foresight is what they're buying. They're buying future profits, not buying past profits. But yeah, succession team and governance systems. So things like the strategy map and the roadmap systems that we use are brilliant because they show that you've got a plan for the future. And I want to know that I'm not going to have to step in and as a buyer and rescue you. I want to know that you've already got a plan for the future, and that all I'm going to do is give you additional opportunity, because that would be a dream, wouldn't it? That would be fantastic from a buyer's point of view. So that's exactly what you want to do. You want to give that sense that you actually know what you're doing.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Okay, do we have another question?
I'll go for one, please. Thanks, Felix. That was great. Really interesting. I was interested in what you were talking about when you were talking about deal structures. And there's obviously, you found, numerous different ways of doing this. And I also sort of note that you said you made a lot of mistakes along the way. Now, obviously, when it comes to doing that deal structure, it's sort of the area where you don't want to make that mistake. And I'm wondering, how is it that where do you turn to for that kind of inspiration or advice on knowing, I guess, what is possible, what is workable, and that just general creativity and imagination on how you can make a deal work and retain people, earn-outs, and so on and so forth?
Well, I think part of it comes from, I hate to say this, but part of it comes from that trial and error, learning by experience, right? I did the classic Interpublic earn-out deal. I completely get, it was very obvious to me as I was walking into that, how it worked. What wasn't obvious to me was the culture clash that was going to happen on the other side of the deal. From a mechanical point of view, the classic ways that the big four do deals is brilliant if you're a giant, yeah. But if you look now at what S4 is doing, they're doing deals in a much different way to the way that WPP, pioneered actually, which are much more collaborative, much more about shared futures, and not so much about siloed P&Ls and competing P&Ls. So there, have a look around at the kinds of deals that are being done. Go and make friends with Paul Winterflood at Kingston Smith, and buy Andy 4 lunches in a row, and go and meet Joe Evans at Lewis Silkin, and whoever else you can find, and find out what they've done. The other thing is, there are any number of people like you who've done it once before. Go and lunch them. That's what I did. I went for coffees with everybody to find out how it worked. In the same way that when I became a non-exec, the first thing I did was I went out and had coffee or beer with every non-exec I could find, so that I could figure out what it was all about. And very quickly came to the conclusion that the only way I was going to differentiate myself was by being able to deliver on a promise. I guarantee what I do now. I don't think anybody else in my field does. But that's because I wanted to find a point of difference. So, but I only learned that by seeing what everybody else did and making friends. And a lot of those people are still friends. We're fellow travelers and sometimes competitors, but you know what? We've all got our own ways of doing it. But that's the way that you're going to find out.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Any more questions?
Well, I'll go for one more then, just if you've got the time. I think I was interested in what you talked about, personal values and core values, and obviously you described that process of how, well, obviously your own personal ones of honor and empathy. I'm just wondering just about the kind of mechanics of that. I understand completely where you're going from and the value of it, but how might you recommend that you might just conduct that process, particularly going into an M&A process, where you've got to sort of speed that.
So it's a 2-hour process. There is a formula for it. It's outlined in the book in very, very simple terms. You get everybody in a room. And actually, I've been doing this on Zoom for the last year, very successfully, actually. But you get everybody in the team in a room. And you impress on everybody that this is personal. It's not the customer comes first, because that's not a core value of anything, right? This is I'm never going to abandon you because I was abandoned when I was 7, right? This kind of level. And so we talk about that a lot, and we say this is personal. Don't think about anybody else. Think about you. And then we start writing down what people come up with, and on a whiteboard. And usually 30 or 40 words will come from a group of 4 or 5 people. Then we do a blind sort of triage of those words. We unpack the words that we don't really understand. Somebody will always say integrity, right? Darth Vader, who's Luke Skywalker earlier? Yeah, Darth Vader had integrity until the 3rd movie, right? So integrity means different things to different people. Honesty, what? Always? What, to your clients? Really? You know, so you need to unpack these things and really get to the deep, deep meanings of these things. And then universally what you'll find is if you get on, if they've got a team already, if you spent some time working with somebody, then you already share values. It's just that they've never been made explicit. This makes them all explicit. Then you triage that list of 30 or 40 words or phrases down to maybe 4 or 5. And then those become the, do we all agree on these? And yes, because you've all done it collectively, that's how you get there. That then becomes your hiring. You know, it's one of your scorecards. Do you meet all 5 of these words? If you meet 4 out of 5 and the other one is integrity, truthfulness, then you're not going to get hired. And it makes the hiring process a bit more of a pain in the ass, but you're absolutely guaranteed to get people who share your values. You know, most of us hate working with clients who don't share our values. Most of us love working with clients who do share our values. Most of us will sell to somebody that share our values, and we'll buy people who share our values, and those will be good deals. And if they're not, it's because we don't share values. The C players that you have in your businesses, of course, none of you do, but if you did, they're people who aren't necessarily just shit at their job. They're just people who don't share the rest of the team's values. And when they move somewhere else, they're likely to become A players somewhere else. You know, so values for me are fundamentally important. Usually it's a 2-hour exercise. We do it as the first stage of proposition development, as it happens, which is a 2-day process. But that's always the very first step that we take when we do proposition development. Is one of the first workshops that we do when we do the 2Y3X program, when we're onboarding new companies into the program.
Thank you.
I can, where are we? Here we go. Can you make it so that I can share my screen, Andy?
That's a good question. Have I made it so that you can't?
I don't know. Hold on a sec. Let's see. Oh, no, I can. No, host disabled participant screen share. If you open up participants list, there's a drop down next to my name that says make it so that I can share my screen. I'm going to show you where it came from, the sort of starting exercise, if you like, and then I'll show you.
If I make you the host, that's the only option I've got.
Yeah, make me co-host. Or yeah.
Hopefully I won't lose the recording. Make host.
There you go.
I'm still recording, so that's all good.
Oh, there we go. Yes, perfect. Right. So this is where we started in our exercise for my company. This is where we ended up. So these are our core values. And this is every single person in 2Y3X shares these values. And they are different for every single organization I've ever worked for to do this.
And Felix, how do you get that out of the the candidates in the hiring process? Is that just a process of really, you
need to learn how to ask questions where the answers shine through. Usually, will one of you tolerate me asking you a couple of questions? Would you
yeah, sure.
be prepared to share? If I say to you core values, deepest red line core values, what are the first 2 words that come to mind?
Well, I've done this process quite a lot with in a corporate way. So in a way, I find it like slightly easier to answer in that sense than I do me personally. But I think they tend to be broadly the same. I value taking action extremely highly.
Okay.
So that idea of sort of being proactive, of delivering, dependability.
Yeah.
Those are, that this idea of yes, stop and think, but don't think and stop kind of thing is a pretty big one for me.
Interesting. Dependability, you said.
Well, yes, I suppose that, yes, I guess that the ability to depend on someone is going to act, I guess, would probably be how I'd see that.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
So,
robustness as well.
Okay, so clearly Freud is alive and well, sitting on one of your books behind you. I'm going to stop there, but you can see that I asked for the first value that would come to his head, and unconsciously he actually told me something that I would now spend probably 10 or 15 minutes exploring with you and with other people in the team to find out what you really meant by dependability and reliability. And is that about constants, or is it about trustworthiness? Is it about not letting people down? Where does that fit? And all of that kind of stuff, even though you actually said something completely different. So that's how you that's how you find out. And it took, what, 3 seconds, and all I had to do was ask your permission. So it's not actually that difficult to find out what people's real values are. One qualifier to that is, when you're doing any kind of deal, whether you're hiring somebody or doing an acquisition, references to check. The first person I almost made an offer to become a 2x3x consultant, 18 months ago. When I checked his references, the first thing somebody said was, he hired us and engaged us and gave us a brief, even though he knew he wouldn't be able to pay us. It was like, thank you. So you do need to check references, because sometimes you get blindsided by people's charisma or the color of their eyes or whatever it is, right? And references are a very, very good way of just checking. If somebody says honor and then you find out they've behaved dishonorably, something's amiss.
Okay, brilliant. Good advice. Okay, so do we have any more questions? I think we're pretty maxed out in terms of time. So thank you very much.
I don't have a question, but I would like to thank Felix for his time, and thank you, Andrew, for making it happen. It's very, very informative, really interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you very much. Cool. I enjoyed that. Thank you.
I enjoyed that too. I'm pretty sure everybody did. And if they can all click that link to Amazon and buy or pre-order that book.
Well, I tell you what, if you all pre-ordered it, that would pay my advance back.
Hey.
That would be amazing. Please do. And I hope you enjoy reading it and I hope that it's useful.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. I think that was useful for all of us.
Right.
Thank you very much, Felix. I'll copy those details, as I said, into our members area and below the video.
Fantastic.
And
now, because I'm the host, if I press end, it ends it.
yeah, leave. We'll force everybody to leave, which is fine, because I think we can end the recording there. So thank you very much.